If you ever find yourself standing outside a warehouse at midnight, clutching a crumpled list of rules you don't understand, I hope you remember this story. I wish someone had told me what I was really signing up for when I took the job at Halcyon Logistics. But desperation has a way of making you ignore the warning signs, and I was desperate. Rent was overdue, my car was on its last legs, and my phone buzzed with reminders of bills I couldn't pay. So when the temp agency called about a night shift position, easy work, good pay, immediate start, I didn't ask questions. I just said yes. The warehouse itself sat on the edge of the industrial district, surrounded by empty lots and flickering streetlights. It was the kind of place you'd drive past without a second thought, a concrete box with no windows and a single metal door. The air smelled like rain and old oil, and the silence pressed in on me as I waited for someone to let me in. My breath fogged in the cold, and I kept checking my phone, half expecting the agency to call and say there'd been a mistake. Instead, the door creaked open and a man in a faded security uniform stepped out. He looked me up and down, then handed me a folded piece of paper. "Read this before you go inside," he said. "Don't lose it. Don't ignore it." His voice was flat, but his eyes were sharp, almost pleading. I nodded, more out of confusion than understanding, and he disappeared back into the building. I unfolded the paper, expecting a list of safety protocols or maybe a schedule. Instead, I found 10 handwritten rules. Some made sense. Always wear your ID badge, but others were strange. If you hear footsteps in aisle 7 after 2 a.m., do not investigate. Never speak to the man in the yellow vest. If the lights flicker 3 times, hide behind the nearest pallet and count to 60. My stomach twisted as I read them, but I told myself it was just a weird company culture thing, maybe a prank for new hires. But as I stood there, the warehouse looming over me and the rules trembling in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just crossed a line I wouldn't be able to uncross. The door closed behind me with a heavy clang, sealing out the night and leaving me in a pool of harsh fluorescent light. The warehouse was colder inside than out, the air tinged with the scent of cardboard, dust, and something metallic I couldn't quite place. My footsteps echoed on the concrete as I followed a faded yellow line painted on the floor, the only splash of color in a world of gray racks and stacked pallets. The place was massive, all stretching into darkness, the ceiling lost in shadows above the humming lights. A woman in a navy blue vest appeared from behind a stack of boxes, clipboard in hand. She looked to be in her late 40s, with sharp eyes and a tired smile. "You must be the new guy," she said, her voice brisk but not unkind. "I'm Carla, night supervisor. You'll be shadowing me for your first shift." She glanced at the paper in my hand and nodded. "Good. You got the rules. Don't lose them." Before I could ask what any of it meant, a younger man strolled over, hands in his pockets, a smirk on his face. "Don't let Carla scare you," he said. "I'm Devin. Been here 6 months. The rules are just to keep the new hires on their toes." He winked, but there was something forced about it, like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. Carla shot him a look. "You'll take this seriously if you want to last, Devin." She turned back to me. "Come on, I'll show you around." We walked the main aisle, her voice echoing as she pointed out the loading docks, the break room, the emergency exits. Everything seemed normal enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Shadows pooled in the corners, and the hum of the lights seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. We passed a row of lockers, most of them dented and covered in stickers. Carla stopped at one and handed me a key. "This one's yours." Keep your stuff locked up. And if you ever find your locker open when you know you closed it, come find me. Don't go through your things alone." She said it so matter-of-factly that I almost missed the warning in her tone. Devin leaned in, lowering his voice. "She's just messing with you. It's all part of the initiation." But his eyes darted to the shadows, and he kept glancing over his shoulder. As we continued the tour, I noticed little things that didn't add up. A pallet jack parked in the middle of an empty aisle, its wheels stained with something dark. A stack of boxes labeled with dates from years ago, covered in a fine layer of dust. A security camera that tracked us as we walked, its red light blinking steadily. By the time we reached the break room, my nerves were frayed. Carla poured herself a cup of coffee and handed me a mug. "You'll get used to it," she said quietly. "Or you won't." Devin just shrugged, but neither of them looked me in the eye. The warehouse felt less like a workplace and more like a test I hadn't studied for, and I was already starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake. After a few minutes in the break room, Carla motioned for me to sit at the battered table. She set her coffee down, folded her hands, and fixed me with a look that made it clear this was not just another orientation. Devin slouched in the corner, scrolling his phone, but I could tell he was listening. Carla nodded at the paper I still clutched. "Let's go over those rules. I know they sound strange, but you need to understand, this isn't like other jobs. People who ignore the rules don't last long here. Some don't last at all." Her voice was low, almost a whisper, and the hum of the vending machine seemed to fade as she spoke. I unfolded the list, smoothing it on the table. The first rule was simple enough. Always wear your ID badge. Carla tapped the line. "That's not just for security. If you lose your badge, come straight to me. Don't wander the aisles looking for it." We had a guy last year, Eddie, lost his badge and spent half the night retracing his steps. We found his shoes by the loading dock. Never saw him again. I swallowed, glancing at Devin, who just shrugged. "Probably quit," he muttered, but his eyes didn't meet mine. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps in aisle 7 after 2 a.m., do not investigate. Carla's lips pressed into a thin line. Aisle 7 is different. If you hear anything there, you come find me or stay put. Don't try to be a hero. The last person who went to check never came back. We heard him calling for help, but by the time we got there, the aisle was empty. Sometimes, late at night, you can still hear him. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Rule 3. Never speak to the man in the yellow vest. I frowned. "Who is he?" Carla shook her head. "No one knows. He's not on payroll, and he doesn't show up on the cameras. If you see him, just walk away. Don't make eye contact. Don't answer if he talks to you. He'll try to get your attention, but you can't let him." One temp tried to help him with a pallet, but it vanished. All we found was his vest, folded neatly on the floor. Devin finally looked up. I saw the guy once. He just stood there, staring. Didn't blink. I left my cart and ran. He tried to laugh, but it came out shaky. Rule 4. If the lights flicker 3 times, hide behind the nearest pallet and count to 60. Carla's voice was urgent. Don't wait. Don't try to finish what you're doing. Just hide. 60 seconds, no more, no less. When the lights come back, you can move again. If you don't hide, you might see things you can't see. Or worse, they might see you. Rule 5. If you find your locker open when you know you closed it, do not touch anything inside. Find Carla immediately. She leaned in. This one's for your own safety. Sometimes things get moved. If you see something in your locker that wasn't there before, don't touch it. Last month, someone found a photo in their locker of themselves sleeping. They quit that night. Rule 6. Never eat or drink anything left in the break room fridge after midnight. Devin snorted. That's just common sense. The stuff in there is nasty. Carla shot him a look. It's not just about food poisoning. Sometimes the labels change. Sometimes the food looks fresh when it shouldn't. If you eat it, you might not feel different at first, but you will. Trust me. Rule 7. If you hear your name whispered over the intercom, do not respond. Carla's eyes were serious. It's not us. No one uses the intercom after midnight. If you answer, you're inviting something in. Rule 8. If you see a door marked Storage B that wasn't there before, do not open it. Walk away and tell Carla. She hesitated. That door shouldn't exist. If you open it, you might not come back. Rule 9. If you ever feel like you're being watched, you probably are. Don't run. Don't panic. Just keep working and find Carla as soon as you can. Rule 10. If you make it to sunrise, clock out and leave immediately. Don't linger. Don't look back. I stared at the list, my skepticism wavering. Carla's face was grave, and even Devin had gone quiet. The rules felt less like a joke and more like a lifeline. I tucked the paper into my pocket, my hands trembling. Carla nodded. Good. Remember them. They're the only thing standing between you and whatever's out there. My first real shift began with a clipboard, a checklist, and a sense of unease that clung to me like a second skin. Carla walked me through the basics, scanned the barcodes, checked the inventory, stacked the boxes, just so. The work itself was simple, almost mindless, but every shadow seemed to stretch a little too far. Every sound echoed a little too long. I tried to focus on the routine, telling myself that rules were just a weird company tradition, but the warehouse had a way of making you doubt your own logic. Devin worked the opposite end of the building, whistling tunelessly as he zipped around on a pallet jack. He'd wave when we passed, but I noticed he never lingered in the same aisle for long. Don't get stuck in one spot, he'd said earlier, half joking. The place gets boring. I laughed it off, but I found myself moving a little faster, glancing over my shoulder more than I wanted to admit. Carla checked in on me every hour or so, her presence oddly comforting. She'd ask about my progress, offer advice, and sometimes just stand quietly, scanning the aisles with a wary eye. I started to appreciate her calm, the way she seemed to know when to speak and when to let the silence settle. She told me about her kids, her years at the warehouse, the co-workers who'd come and gone. You learn to trust your instincts here, she said. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The first odd thing happened around 1 a.m. I was restocking aisle 5 when I heard a faint tapping, like fingernails on metal, coming from the far end. I paused, listening, but the sound stopped as soon as I turned my head. I shrugged it off, but a few minutes later, I found a box on the floor that I was sure I hadn't seen before. It was sealed, but the label was smudged, the date unreadable. I picked it up, meaning to ask Carla about it, but when I turned back, the box was gone. I stood there, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I'd imagined it. Later, as I passed the break room, I caught a glimpse of someone inside, a man in a yellow vest, standing perfectly still, staring at the vending machine. I froze, remembering the rule. He didn't move, didn't turn, but I felt his gaze like a weight pressing on my chest. I kept walking, forcing myself not to look back until I was safely down the next aisle. When I finally glanced over my shoulder, the break room was empty. During a quick break, Devin joined me by the loading dock, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "You see anything weird yet?" he asked, voice low. I hesitated, then nodded. He exhaled slowly. "Yeah, it gets worse. Just stick to the rules. And if you ever hear your name on the intercom, run the other way." He tried to smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. By the end of the shift, my nerves were frayed, but I'd survived. Carla clapped me on the shoulder as I clocked out. "Not bad for your first night," she said. "Just remember, routine is your friend. The rules are your shield. Don't let the warehouse get inside your head." I nodded, clutching my list of rules like a talisman, already dreading what the next night might bring. The second night, I arrived early, determined to prove to myself that the rules were just a strange initiation ritual. The warehouse looked the same as before, silent, sprawling, indifferent, but I felt different. I'd spent the day replaying every odd moment from my first shift, trying to rationalize the tapping, the missing box, the man in the yellow vest. By the time Carla handed me my clipboard, I was jumpy, my nerves stretched thin. The night started quietly. I settled into a rhythm, scanning barcodes, stacking boxes, and keeping one eye on the clock. Devin was unusually quiet, sticking to the far aisles and barely making eye contact. Carla seemed preoccupied, checking her phone more than usual and glancing at the security monitors with a frown. The air felt heavier, as if the warehouse itself was waiting for something. Around 2:10 a.m., I was restocking aisle 7 when I heard it, footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing from the far end. My heart thudded in my chest. I remembered the rule. If you hear footsteps in aisle 7 after 2 a.m., do not investigate. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to look, to see who or what was there. The footsteps grew louder, closer, then stopped. Silence pressed in, thick and suffocating. I told myself it was just Devin messing with me, or maybe Carla doing a spot check. I took a cautious step forward, peering down the aisle. Nothing. The racks were empty, the floor spotless. I almost laughed at myself, relief flooding through me. But then the footsteps started again, this time behind me. I spun around, but the aisle was empty. The lights above flickered once, then steadied. Temptation gnawed at me. I could just walk to the end of the aisle, prove to myself there was nothing there, and put the whole thing to rest. I took a step, then another, the sound of my own breathing loud in my ears. Halfway down the aisle, I heard my name, soft, almost a whisper, echoing from the shadows. I stopped cold, the list of rules burning in my pocket. A shape flickered at the edge of my vision, gone before I could focus. The air grew colder, and I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck. I remembered Carla's warning. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I backed away, forcing myself to retrace my steps, never turning my back on the empty aisle. The footsteps followed, always just out of sight, until I reached the main corridor and the sound vanished. I found Carla in the break room, her face pale. "Aisle 7?" she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to speak. She poured me a cup of coffee, her hand steady. "You did the right thing. Never go looking for the source. That's how it gets you." She didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. Later, during a lull, I saw Devin standing at the entrance to aisle 7, peering into the darkness. He looked back at me, a challenge in his eyes. "It's just a story," he said, voice too loud in the quiet. "There's nothing down there." Before I could stop him, he stepped into the aisle, his footsteps echoing. I watched, heart pounding, as he disappeared into the shadows. Minutes passed. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath. Then, faintly, I heard Devin's voice, calling for help, then screaming. The sound twisted, becoming something inhuman, echoing through the racks. Carla appeared at my side, her face grim. "Don't go after him," she said. He knew the rules. The screaming stopped as suddenly as it had started. Silence returned, heavier than before. Carla led me away, her grip firm on my arm. "Sometimes people have to learn the hard way," she said softly. "But you don't have to. Remember the rules. They're not just for show." I nodded, shaken to my core. The warehouse felt different now, darker, hungrier. I realized the rules weren't just guidelines. They were the only thing keeping me alive. And I'd just seen what happened to those who broke them. The warehouse was never the same after Devin vanished. His absence was a hole that nothing could fill, a silent warning that echoed through every aisle. Carla didn't mention him again, and I learned not to ask. But the rules felt heavier now, as if the paper in my pocket had gained weight with every shift. I clung to them, repeating each one in my head like a prayer. The next few nights blurred together, each one more tense than the last. The footsteps in aisle 7 became a regular occurrence, always just out of sight, always stopping when I got too close. I avoided that aisle, but the warehouse seemed to sense my fear, pushing me closer with every new task. The lights flickered more often, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times in quick succession. Each time, I dropped what I was doing and hid behind the nearest pallet, counting to 60 with my heart hammering in my chest. Once, I heard something breathing on the other side of the boxes, slow and wet, but I kept my eyes shut and my body still until the lights steadied and the presence faded. One night, as I was finishing inventory in the back storage, I found my locker open. I knew I'd locked it before my shift, double-checked the latch, even tugged on the handle to be sure. Now it hung open, my bag half unzipped, and a photograph lay on top of my lunch. It was a picture of me, taken from behind as I worked in aisle 5. I stared at it, my skin crawling, then remembered the rule: do not touch anything inside. Find Carla immediately. I backed away, refusing to let my curiosity win, and found Carla in the office. She didn't ask questions, just nodded and locked the break room door behind us. "You did the right thing," she said, her voice tight. "It's trying to get your attention. Don't let it." The intercom crackled to life later that night, static hissing through the speakers. I froze, clipboard in hand, as my name echoed through the warehouse, soft and distorted. "Eli, Eli, come to aisle 3. The voice was almost familiar, like my mother's, but wrong in a way I couldn't explain. My throat tightened. I gripped the rules in my pocket, forcing myself to stay put. The voice grew more insistent, pleading, then angry, until it cut off with a burst of static. I stood there, shaking, until Carla found me and led me to the break room. "It's getting bolder," she said. "You can't trust anything you hear after midnight." The man in the yellow vest appeared more often now, always at the edge of my vision, always watching. Once, I caught him standing by the loading dock, his face hidden in shadow. He raised a hand, beckoning me closer, but I turned away, heart pounding, and didn't look back. The urge to help, to ask if he needed something, gnawed at me, but the memory of Devin's scream kept me anchored. One night, I found a door marked Storage B at the end of an aisle that hadn't been there before. The paint was fresh, the handle gleaming. I reached for it, curiosity burning, but the rules screamed in my mind. I stepped back, forcing myself to walk away, and the door was gone when I looked again. I told Carla, and she just nodded, her face pale. "It's testing you," she said. "It wants you to slip." The break room fridge became a battleground. I'd see food that wasn't there before, sandwiches with my name on them, drinks I'd never brought. Once, I almost took a bite, hunger and exhaustion blurring my judgment, but the rules stopped me. I threw the food away, watching as the label changed before my eyes, my name fading into someone else's. The pressure built with every shift. I started seeing things in the corners of my vision, shapes that moved when I blinked, shadows that stretched across the floor. The warehouse felt alive, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. Carla grew more distant, her eyes haunted, her voice strained. "You're doing well," she told me one night, but I could see the fear behind her words. "Just a little longer. Sunrise always comes." But sunrise felt further away each night. The rules were no longer just a list. They were a lifeline, the only thing keeping me from slipping into whatever darkness had claimed Devin and the others before him. Every choice became a test: compassion versus survival, curiosity versus caution. The warehouse wanted me to break, to forget, to give in. And I was starting to wonder how much longer I could hold out. Before the warehouse, my life was a string of unfinished chapters. I'd bounced from job to job, never staying long enough to make friends or leave a mark. My father used to say I was always running from something, but I think I was just searching for a place that felt like mine. When he got sick last year, I moved back home, took care of him until the end. After the funeral, the house felt too empty, the silence too heavy. That's when the bills started piling up, and I found myself at the temp agency, willing to take anything that paid. Carla's story was different, but the warehouse had left its mark on her too. One night, during a lull, she sat across from me in the break room, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug. "I used to be a teacher," she said, her voice soft. "History. I loved it. But after my divorce, I needed something steady. This place was supposed to be temporary." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That was 12 years ago. The rules keep you alive, but they also keep you here. It's hard to leave once you know what's waiting in the dark." I started to notice the way Carla checked the security monitors, her eyes lingering on certain aisles. She kept a notebook in her locker, filled with dates and names, people who'd worked here, people who'd disappeared. "I keep track," she admitted one night. "It helps me remember. Help me warn the new ones." There was a page for Devin, his name circled in red. "He was stubborn. Reminds me of my son." She didn't say more, but I saw the pain flicker across her face. There was another worker, too, Marta, who worked the early shift. I'd only met her once, but I found a note tucked into my locker one night. "If you ever see me after midnight, it's not me. Don't follow." The handwriting was shaky, desperate. I asked Carla about it, and she just shook her head. "Marta lost her brother here. He broke the rules. Sometimes, the warehouse brings back pieces of people, but they're never whole. If you see someone you know after midnight, you keep your distance." The more I learned, the more I realized everyone here was running from something. The warehouse was a refuge and a prison, a place where the rules offered safety but demanded a price. I started to wonder what it wanted from us, why it chose certain people to test and others to spare. My own motivations shifted as the nights wore on. At first, I just wanted a paycheck, a way to keep the lights on and the creditors at bay. But as the warehouse pressed in, I found myself wanting to prove something, to my father's memory, to Carla, to myself. I wanted to survive, not just for the money, but to show I could, that I wasn't just another name in Carla's notebook. The warehouse fed on secrets, on regrets, and unfinished business. It twisted them, used them to lure you into breaking the rules. I saw it in the way Carla lingered by the phone, waiting for a call that would never come, or the way Marta's note trembled with fear. I felt it in myself. Every time I heard my father's voice in the static, urging me to come home. We were all haunted in one way or another. The warehouse just made it impossible to forget. It happened on a night when the air felt heavier than usual, thick with the promise of a storm. The warehouse lights buzzed and flickered, casting long, restless shadows that seemed to crawl along the floor. I was halfway through inventory in aisle 5 when the intercom crackled to life, louder and clearer than ever before. "Eli, please, I need your help. I'm in storage B." The voice was my father's, impossible, unmistakable. I froze, the scanner slipping from my hand and clattering to the concrete. My heart hammered in my chest. I knew the rules. I knew what Carla had said about voices and doors that shouldn't exist. But the longing in that voice, the way it pleaded, cut through every layer of caution I'd built up. I wanted to believe, just for a moment, that it really was him. I forced myself to look away, to focus on the list of rules in my pocket. If you see a door marked Storage B that wasn't there before, do not open it. Walk away and tell Carla. I repeated it in my head, over and over, but the voice kept calling, softer now, almost weeping. "Eli, please. I'm so cold. I just want to come home." I stumbled out of the aisle, searching for Carla, but she was nowhere to be found. The warehouse felt bigger, the aisles longer, the shadows deeper. I passed the break room, empty. The office, dark. Panic clawed at my throat. The intercom crackled again, the voice more urgent. "Eli, I need you. Please, son." That's when I saw it. At the end of aisle 7, where there had never been a door before, a new one stood. Storage B stenciled in crisp black letters. The handle gleamed, almost inviting. I took a step toward it, then another, the rules screaming in my mind. But the voice, my father's voice, was so close, so real. Behind me, footsteps echoed. I turned, expecting Carla, but found only the man in the yellow vest, standing perfectly still, his face hidden in shadow. He raised a hand, pointing at the door, as if urging me to open it. My breath caught. I remembered Devin, remembered the photograph in my locker, remembered Marta's note. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. The lights flickered 3 times. I should have hidden, should have counted to 60, but I was rooted in place, torn between the rules and the hope that maybe, just maybe, I could save someone. The door to Storage B creaked open, and a cold wind swept out, carrying the scent of earth and rot. A shape moved inside, tall and thin, its face a blur of shifting features, sometimes my father, sometimes Devin, sometimes a stranger. "Eli," it whispered, stretching out a hand. "Come with me. You don't have to be alone anymore." I stumbled back, finally breaking free of the spell. The man in the yellow vest stepped forward, blocking my path. His eyes glowed in the darkness, empty and endless. I remembered the rule, never speak to him, never answer. He opened his mouth, and a chorus of voices poured out, all the people the warehouse had claimed, all begging, all accusing. I ran. I didn't look back. I ducked behind a pallet, heart pounding, and started counting. 1, 2, 3. The lights flickered, the voices screamed, the air grew colder. I pressed my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut. 40, 50, 60. When I opened my eyes, the warehouse was silent. The door to Storage B was gone. The man in the yellow vest had vanished. But the damage was done. My hands shook as I crawled out from behind the pallet. The rules crumpled in my fist. I'd come so close to breaking them, to joining the others lost in the dark. Carla found me slumped against the wall, tears streaming down my face. She didn't ask what happened. She just helped me to my feet, her grip steady and warm. "You made it," she whispered. "That's all that matters." But as I looked around the warehouse, I knew something had changed. The rules had saved me, but only just. The warehouse had shown me what it could do, what it wanted. And I knew, deep down, that it would try again. The rest of that shift passed in a haze, every sound amplified, every shadow suspect. Carla stayed close, her presence a silent reassurance as we finished the night's work in near silence. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see the door to storage reappear or the man in the yellow vest lurking at the edge of my vision. But the warehouse was quiet, almost subdued, as if it too was recovering from what had happened. When the sun finally crept through the high windows, painting the concrete floor with pale gold, I felt a wave of exhaustion so deep it made my bones ache. Carla and I clocked out together, neither of us speaking until we reached the parking lot. She handed me a fresh copy of the rules, her handwriting steady, but her eyes rimmed red. "You did everything you could," she said quietly. "But it never gets easier. The warehouse remembers everyone who's ever worked here. It remembers what we're afraid of." I nodded, unable to find words. The image of the shifting face behind the storage door haunted me, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing myself. I thought of Devin, of Marta's brother, of all the names in Carla's notebook. Survival here wasn't just about following the rules. It was about living with the knowledge of what you'd seen, what you'd almost become. The next few days, I moved through life in a fog. I jumped at sudden noises, avoided mirrors, and kept the rules folded in my pocket at all times. My phone buzzed with messages from friends I hadn't seen in months, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain what had happened? How could I make them understand that the world was stranger and more dangerous than they'd ever imagined? Carla checked in on me, sometimes with a text, sometimes with a cup of coffee left on my locker. Our relationship changed, less supervisor and new hire, more survivors bound by a secret no one else could see. She told me about her first close call, about the nightmares that never really went away. "You learn to live with it," she said, "but you never forget." The warehouse felt different now. The rules were no longer just a list. They were a shield, a fragile barrier between me and the darkness that pressed in from every corner. I followed them religiously, not out of fear, but out of respect for what they represented. Every shift was a test, every sunrise a small victory. But I knew, deep down, that the warehouse was always watching, always waiting for the next mistake. And I knew that surviving here meant accepting that some scars would never heal. A week after the night of the storage door, I found myself standing outside the warehouse again, the rules folded and creased in my hand. I'd thought about quitting every day since, about walking away and never looking back. I nodded, unable to find words. The image of the shifting face behind the storage door haunted me, a reminder of how close I'd come to losing myself. I thought of Devin, of Marta's brother, of all the names in Carla's notebook. Survival here wasn't just about following the rules. It was about living with the knowledge of what you'd seen, what you'd almost become. The next few days, I moved through life in a fog. I jumped at sudden noises, avoided mirrors, and kept the rules folded in my pocket at all times. My phone buzzed with messages from friends I hadn't seen in months, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. How could I explain what had happened? How could I make them understand that the world was stranger and more dangerous than they'd ever imagined? Carla checked in on me, sometimes with a text, sometimes with a cup of coffee left on my locker. Our relationship changed, less supervisor and new hire, more survivors bound by a secret no one else could see. She told me about her first close call, about the nightmares that never really went away. You learn to live with it, she said, but you never forget. The warehouse felt different now. The rules were no longer just a list. They were a shield, a fragile barrier between me and the darkness that pressed in from every corner. I followed them religiously, not out of fear, but out of respect for what they represented. Every shift was a test, every sunrise a small victory. But I knew, deep down, that the warehouse was always watching, always waiting for the next mistake. And I knew that surviving here meant accepting that some scars would never heal. A week after the night of the storage bay door, I found myself standing outside the warehouse again, the rules folded and creased in my hand. I'd thought about quitting every day since, about walking away and never looking back. But each time I tried to picture a life beyond these walls, I saw the faces of those who hadn't made it. Devin, Marta's brother, the others whose names I'd never know. I realized I couldn't leave, not yet. Not while there were still new hires coming through the door, still people who needed to be warned. That night, a new temp arrived. He was young, nervous, clutching a backpack and glancing around like he expected someone to jump out at him. I saw myself in him, the same mix of hope and desperation, the same hunger for a fresh start. Carla introduced us, her voice gentle but firm. "Eli will show you the ropes," she said, pressing a fresh list of rules into my hand. "Listen to him. The rules aren't a joke." We sat in the break room, the hum of the vending machine filling the silence. I watched the new guy read the list, his brow furrowing as he reached the stranger rules. "Is this for real?" he asked, half laughing, half uncertain. I remembered my own skepticism, the way I'd tried to rationalize every warning. I shook my head. "It's real. All of it. If you want to make it through your first week, memorize every word. And if something feels wrong, find me or Carla. Don't try to handle it alone." He nodded, folding the paper and tucking it into his pocket. I saw the way his hands trembled, the way his eyes darted to the shadows in the corners. I wanted to tell him everything, to warn him about the voices, the doors, the man in the yellow vest. But I knew some lessons could only be learned the hard way. As the shift began, I walked the aisles with him, pointing out the safe spots, the places to avoid, the little tricks I'd picked up. The warehouse felt quieter than usual, as if it was waiting, watching. I wondered if it remembered me, if it was already testing the new guy, searching for a weakness. At sunrise, we clocked out together. The new hire looked exhausted but relieved. "It wasn't so bad," he said, forcing a smile. I just nodded, knowing how quickly that could change. As I stepped outside, the morning light spilling across the parking lot, I glanced back at the warehouse. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move behind the high windows, a flicker of yellow in the gloom. I shivered, pulling my jacket tighter. I don't know how long I'll stay. Maybe until the rules change, or until I finally run out of luck. But for now, I'll keep showing up, keep passing on the rules, keep watching the doors that shouldn't exist. Because someone has to. And because the warehouse is always hungry, always waiting for the next name to add to its list. If you ever find yourself working the night shift at a place like this, remember, the rules are the only thing standing between you and the dark. Don't forget them. And whatever you do, don't look back.